Hello and welcome to another episode of our Muscular Dystrophy UK podcast series, Muscles Matter. I'm Becca and I'm your podcast host for today. I work at Muscular Dystrophy UK as the Stories Officer and I live with SMA Type 2. I'm really excited to have three great guests with me today, sisters Cerys and Cadi and Leanne Blackmore, to talk about what it's like having several family members living with the same muscle wasting conditions. We're going to be discussing how this affects relationships in the family, different levels of progression, and much more. So let's dive right in. I'm going to start by asking our guests to introduce themselves. Cerys, can you briefly tell us a bit about yourself and your family?
Hi guys, I'm Cerys and I'm 24 years old and I live in Cardiff in Wales, and I have limb-girdle muscular dystrophy type 2I, otherwise known as R9. I'm the oldest of three sisters and I have a podcast called Unbalanced, and I share my own experiences with LGMD as well as sharing other people's experience with all different types of disabilities, conditions and any kind of life barrier. So that's a bit about me and I'll pass it on.
Great, thanks, Cerys. And Cadi, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I am the second Davidge of daughter. All three of us have the same form of LGMD.
Great, thank you. And Leanne, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, so I'm Leanne, I'm 42 and I live with FSH muscular dystrophy, and I have two daughters, Evie who's 14 and Martha who's 10, both with same condition, same type of muscular dystrophy.
Great, thanks guys. Really excited to have you on the podcast with us. So you've already said a bit about the conditions that you have, but do you want to tell us a little bit about who has the conditions in your family, and maybe the difference in how it affects you compared to other family members? Cerys, let's go back to starting with you.
Okay, so limb-girdle muscular dystrophy is a condition that affects the limb-girdle muscles. So that would be like the shoulders, the thighs, the hip, kind of surrounding area of those muscles. So it's a progressive condition, like a lot of muscular dystrophies. It's a condition where those muscles will weaken over time. There are over 30 subtypes of limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. And I suppose right now we're just very hopeful for a treatment. There's a lot of research going on that's very exciting for different trials that's happening all over the world, mostly in America. And we have just been quite amazed by the community over the past few years, especially. We were all diagnosed quite young, but it wasn't until the last, I'd say, 5 years that we really got to know the community as a family. I think our parents were the ones that took on the hardness of having the condition when we were first diagnosed, because we were too young to understand it and we weren't affected. And as we've gotten older and progressed more in our conditions, we've been able to reach out to other members of our community, and it's just been absolutely incredible, both online and in person in conferences.
Great. And Cadi, do you want to say a bit about maybe how the condition affects you compared to your other two sisters?
Yeah, sure. So even though we have the exact same a subtype, it actually affects us all quite differently. So for Cerys, the thing that she really struggles with more is the weakness in the muscles and the lack of strength to do different tasks. So getting up off the floor or stairs, or carrying heavy things, or picking up stuff from the floor as well. Where with me and with my younger sister Becca, it affects us more with fatigue and pain. So I feel like I have a little bit more strength in comparison to Cerys, but I struggle a lot more with being on my feet or walking long distances. I get a lot of pains and fatigue and a tiredness in any muscle that I overuse or just use a lot that day at all.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And Leanne, how about you and your daughters?
Yeah, so I have got FSH muscular dystrophy, which generally affects the facial muscles, the humeral muscles, and the scapular muscles. I was diagnosed when I was 12, so I've been obviously living with the condition for quite some time. Even my eldest, who's 14, she was diagnosed when she was 7. Martha, she is 10, and she was diagnosed when she was 4. And we kind of refer to ourselves as being boats in the same sea, but our boats are all slightly different. So for Evie and Martha, they are both full-time wheelchair users now. So their legs are quite heavily affected, whereas for myself, my legs aren't, but my upper strength isn't great. And I had scapular fusion surgery in my 20s to try and help with that. Evie is, like I said, she's a full-time wheelchair user. She also has type 1 diabetes, which isn't related to the muscular dystrophy, but she's managing 2 conditions. She feels and kind of struggles a lot with fatigue, and both the girls have got curvature of the spine, so they are finding that they are now getting pain in their lower back, which they didn't have before. Whereas for myself, I've always had back pain. That's kind of how it was the first symptom, I guess, for me. Martha, she has an AFL on her foot, whereas Evie doesn't. And Martha's speech is quite affected, whereas Evie's isn't, and mine isn't too affected either. So we are all, like I say, although it's the same condition, it shows itself differently and affects us all slightly differently. Although fatigue, I would say, is the top one for us both, all 3 of us. Yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear how, even though, it's the same condition, it all affects everyone quite differently. So, Leanne, how do you feel that having the condition that's the same as you and your daughters has affected your relationship?
So I think when Evie was first diagnosed, although it was a bit of a shock, it kind of wasn't. I think we could sort of see early signs, but it was really her the mobility that was when you saw her compared to her peers in her class, that was quite hard. It was hard for her, but also hard for us to see. And obviously she was diagnosed before Martha. In a way, for Evie, I think she found it a little bit reassuring that because I had the condition too, that I kind of understood. And then I think the same for Martha too, knowing that her older sister had it. They are very protective of one another in that way. Think that sometimes Martha feels like she has to have sleep studies and Evie doesn't, and so Martha feels sometimes that's a little bit unfair. But like I say to her, it very much can be swings and roundabouts. There might be appointments that Evie needs to go to that Martha doesn't. So, but I was quite concerned when Evie was diagnosed of how we were going to kind of navigate things if Martha didn't have the condition and then it was Evie, how Evie would feel growing up, and also how Martha would feel. Because I have a brother, and although I've got muscular dystrophy, he doesn't. And so I wondered how the girls would feel with that, if that was to have happened. But obviously it didn't, and Martha then was diagnosed too. And in many ways, the word nice isn't probably the right word to use, but we all have that extra bit of empathy, I think, for each other. And if there's one thing that maybe Martha's struggling with, then Evie will encourage or maybe say to her, I struggle a bit with that, but I do it this way. So although there are negatives, I think we do try and find, to support one another, try and find some positives.
Yeah, definitely. And Cerys and Cadi, do you sort of relate in any way to that? What effect has it had on your relationships as sisters?
Do you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, I think that it is nice to know that we're not the only ones going through it, but like Cadi said, we are very different. What has kind of brought us together is when, say, one of us experiences something that is unusual to other people but normal for them, and they wonder, is this an LGMD thing? Like, why am I getting this? For example, my tongue strains up and I can get really bad tongue pain if I strain it, like if I'm yawning too hard or coughing or throwing up, for example. And I thought this was normal, and other people said that they've never experienced this, and then Cadi and Becca would turn around and say, we get that too. So it's really nice to be able to relate to each other in that way, and to find some common symptoms, and to know that we know each other's limits because we have the same kind of limits. If we're stood up for too long, we would encourage the other one to sit down, or please, take turns and sit in the wheelchair for a bit and I'll stand. And it's nice to look out for each other because we know exactly what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you said, Leanne, we all have that extra bit of empathy for each other. And I think as a trio as well, we can definitely find the humour a lot easier as well. And that makes the whole journey a lot easier as a trio, because we can kind of poke fun at each other as well at the same time, while also being empathetic and understanding, which really helps.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if we stay with the two of you, how do you and your sisters sort of discuss your condition together? And maybe has it sort of like differed as you've grown up compared to when you were younger?
I have to take the lead on this question because as the oldest daughter, I am the most progressed. So my symptoms are further down the line, shall we say, than Cadi and Becca. And I think they kind of look to me as kind of looking into the future a bit. And they often compare their symptoms to mine. For example, I can't get up off the floor without using my hands, or barely at all anymore. But they still can. So they're kind of like, okay, well, if you couldn't at our age and we still can, we're doing okay. We're behind you in that timeline, which is, again, quite a humorous thing. But I think it's interesting to be able to discuss the differences in our symptoms, but also be able to relate to the other. And we are quite a humorous family anyway. I think humour plays a big role in just getting by with this condition. But yeah, like I said, it's nice to be able to compare notes and to relate to each other on that level.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Cerys. And to you, Leanne, how do you sort of talk with your daughters about having FSHD? It might have been quite different, when they were younger, and with each of them being different ages.
Yeah, I think when Evie was younger, it was very much baby steps, what we kind of talked about and how we explained things to her. We didn't want to overwhelm her, and we also didn't really want to frighten her. So it was very much baby steps. And I think the support that we have had from the hospital and from the team up there, that was really so good for both me and my husband, to know how to sort of progress conversations with her. And I kind of think actually for Martha, she has kind of just been used to seeing me and Evie. And so when she had her diagnosis, she was slightly different with how she just, as a child, or as children sometimes do, was just, okay, fair enough. And just went with it. I think it's as she's got older and she's seen change within herself,
Yeah.
that's when it's quite tricky, and when having to have those conversations has been a little bit harder.
Yeah, so true. Thank you guys. So you've all mentioned that your progression of the conditions has been quite different to other family members. How does it affect you sort of seeing that difference? Leanne, if we stick with you this time.
Yeah. So I personally find it really tricky when I see the girls struggling. I think because for me, knowing that the condition has come from me and no one else in my family has muscular dystrophy, I do find that hard. And I think to begin with, when both the girls were diagnosed, it took me quite a while to kind of accept it. But I then felt like, well, I can't change it. But what I can do is kind of be their voice while they're younger and show them that actually you don't have to let it stop you living your life and doing the things you want to do. So for me, I still work. I still try and do and be the same as anybody else really, that doesn't have any sort of disabilities. So I try and show them that side, but then I do I always used to perhaps hide my emotions slightly, but now I've got better at showing emotion about it, because I then didn't want them to feel that you shouldn't get upset, because actually sometimes it is really frustrating when you want to do something yourself and you try your hardest and you have to ask for that little bit of help. Um, and so I wanted them to see that actually it's okay. And I think if anything for us, just talking has been really, really the best thing for us, and to be open and honest about it rather than sort of keeping anything to ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Leanne. And Cadi, how about you? How is it sort of seeing, obviously, like that Cerys's condition is a bit more progressed? How is that for you?
It definitely can be difficult, absolutely, because especially because as any family member would, we only want the best for the people that we love, and seeing someone in pain is always hard, and especially because I can't imagine how it must have been for our parents as well, because they were obviously told first, and we weren't properly explained to what the condition was until we were a bit older and it actually started to affect us. So I think we were quite lucky as a family in the sense of we were diagnosed pre-symptomatic, and that's quite rare. And our parents kind of had that time to kind of process it themselves and understand what they were getting themselves into, I suppose. And then once it's started to affect us in our early teens, like childhood, we already knew what we were looking out for.
And so I suppose it can be, challenging with a muscle wasting condition, thinking of different things to do. And I imagine that maybe it's harder when there's several family members that have the same condition with different levels of progression. Leanne, what do you enjoy doing as a family, and what have you found like some of the most inclusive things to do?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when you're all kind of at a little bit of a different level, trying to find things that we can all do together is important, and it is quite tricky. That's one thing I would say that we're probably still trying to navigate now. There were certain things that Evie would be able to do, but Martha would have struggled to do. So, like, Evie was able to ride her bike for a certain period of time, but now that's just not possible for her. And Martha, she's never been able to ride a bike. So, just things like going for a family bike ride would be tricky for us.
Mm.
But I would say swimming is something that I kind of feel has a number of benefits. Obviously, it's not only good exercise, but it's non-weight bearing and you can have fun in the pool. We certainly don't do that enough. And yeah, if anything, we should do that more. But we've also now got a little dog, and the girls have both got powered wheelchairs, so we like to take Daisy out for walks. And she's really brought us together as well and brought lots of fun to our house. So I would say that, yeah, that's something that we enjoy doing, and having sort of family film nights. We all enjoy, we bicker slightly over what film we're going to watch. But yeah, so those are the things that as a family we enjoy doing.
Amazing. What's your dog? What dog is it?
She's a miniature dash hound, and she's called Daisy.
Beautiful. And Cerys, how about you and your family?
Well, obviously the activities we do together have changed over the years. We were a very active family. We used to go on bike rides together, and I think when my parents received the news of our diagnosis before we were starting to show symptoms, I think they were very determined to give us opportunities that we may not be able to do in the future. So we climbed Yr Wyddfa together, which is the tallest mountain in Wales, in England and Wales. And I think I was 10 years old when we did that, and I struggled then. I would not have been able to do that now. But now I think we just enjoy different activities. You know, it looks different, but we still enjoy quality time together. Playing board games, film nights, which are still things we used to do growing up. So it's not like they've drastically changed. I think we crammed in a lot of things that we could do back then, like going skiing or climbing mountains or whatever, that we just can't now. But I think we can still enjoy time together now. And I think it's always good to just focus on the positives, focus on what you can do. And I think doing things like that, like playing board games or going for walks together or going to concerts and musicals together, those are things that don't make us feel disabled, because we don't struggle more than the rest of the family. Yes, there are a few obstacles, but when we're with our family who know us and our parents know us well and what we need, we can help each other, and we don't feel like a burden for asking for help because they know exactly what we need. So it's kind of like a safe space to not feel different from the rest of the world when we're together, I think.
Thanks, Cerys. So well said. Well, that's nearly all we've got time for, but we'd like to give our listeners something to take away. So, Leanne, do you have any final tips or advice to other people in a similar situation as you?
I think for us as a family, the main thing that we have realised is to talk and be honest with one another, and yeah, when, you know, rather than sort of if you're having a bad day, rather than kind of keeping it to yourself, or if something's been bothering you, to talk about it and talk to one another. And yeah, I would say that's the main thing, because I think if you can be open and honest with one another, a problem shared is a problem halved. So if we've got difficulties, just talking it through with one another and trying to find a way forward is super helpful.
Definitely. And Cadi, how about you?
For me, I'd say to find the fun. So, as I said, that can look quite different depending on how a disability affects you. But it's really important to focus on what you can still do or experience, and to have the support around you of the people who will fight for your needs if you need them, and who will ensure that you can still have a good time at different activities.
100%. And Cerys, any last words of wisdom?
Just to add on to what Cadi said about finding a good support system around you, I think find a community. It's quite a lonely journey when you're the only one going through it. Even if you've got siblings with the same condition or other family members, there's nothing like finding a wider community, which does exist now. You know, years ago when I was diagnosed, the community weren't connected in the way that they are now. And there's just so many resources out there and so many people ready to relate with you, share advice, and it's just honestly it's really changed my mindset of how I live with this condition. It shows that things are possible and I shouldn't limit myself just because I can't do certain things. There are always ways to adapt. So it's really changed my mindset for good, and MDUK are a great resource of that, so thank you as well.
Great, thanks guys. Wise words from you all. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks so much, Leanne, Cerys, and Cadi, for coming on our podcast and sharing your stories. I'm sure our listeners have found it really interesting. If you would like to hear more from Cerys, you can listen to our own podcast, On Balance with Cerys Savage, on Spotify and other podcast platforms. At Muscular Dystrophy UK, we're proud to have recently launched our bold, ambitious new 10-year strategy. Over the next decade, we'll be focusing on 4 key strategic goals, one of which is no one faces their journey alone. Our aim is to reach everyone with information and support at the point of their diagnosis and be there for them at every stage of their journey. If you've been affected by any of the topics discussed in today's podcast and would like to talk to somebody, our helpline team is here to offer support and guidance. You can find their contact details at musculardystrophyuk.org/support. You might also like to join one of our WhatsApp support groups. Our team can provide more information about these and the other support services we offer. To find out more about our new strategy and our immediate priorities, visit musculardystrophyuk.org/our-strategy. If you would like to send in any suggestions for future discussions on Muscles Matter podcast, or have any questions following today's discussions for us or our guests, please contact us on podcast@musculardystrophyuk.org. And don't forget to subscribe for alerts when the next episode is out. Have a great day, and we look forward to the next time.